Yes, we are live. So, hello everyone. Welcome and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Claudia and I am a co-organizer for Testinui. We are excited. Okay. We are excited to have Shivani today as our special guest. We met at Agile Testing Days USA, and today we have the pleasure to have her at Testinui. Welcome, Shivani.
Thank you so much.
So before starting, if you have any questions or comments about what Shivani will present, please write them in the live comment panel located on the left of your screen. We will review them at the end of Shivani's presentation. So thanks again, Shivani, for joining us, and we will start just now. Let me share the screen. Very fast, this. I
know
will
first
remove
outside of world.
yeah, I will remove ourselves and start sharing.
Okay.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to my talk, The Power of Mocking APIs. A little bit about myself. My name is Shivani Gaba. Originally from India, I'm currently working in Germany as a lead QA engineer in Newark SE. I have around 8 years of experience in testing domain and I've really enjoyed my journey until now. I'm a very happy-go-lucky person, so you'll always see me smiling, laughing, making others also smile. But there are also times when I'm like this, so frustrated and annoyed and almost about to bang my head in computer. And do you know why? What I'm trying to do here? I'm trying to test a very complicated system, so which has multiple APIs involved. So I'm trying to reproduce a bug from the production environment, which is coming because the API we depend upon is giving us error. And that is why our system is also showing error. And I'm trying to reproduce that in test environment and I cannot. And this has happened to me not only once, but multiple number of times. Sometimes trying to test something, sometimes trying to reproduce some things, and I've invested a lot of time and energy in this. And I thought it would be interesting if I tell you my story, if I share my experience with you, tell you about my products, what problems did we face, and how did we handle them. But I thought it would be even cooler if we explore something together, an application that we all are familiar with. So we try to explore that application, we try to test it and see where we are stuck and how we can find solution for that. So the application we'll test today is a weather check application. It's a simple application that I've created for the demo of this talk. At the end of the talk, I would share the source code of the weather check application and also the source code for the mocks that we'll create. So let's have a quick look to the application. So this is the application that I've created. So it has a text box where we can enter a city name or any place name, for example, Hamburg. And if I click get weather, it would display me the weather of the place that I've entered. So here we can see, for example, on left hand side, there's an image like it's foggy. So it's a fog image and it shows about some specific details like the temperature and that it's foggy here in Hamburg. And on the right hand side, it's showing about some specific details like what's the temperature, what's the wind speed, what's humidity, what's sunshine, sunset, and so on. So in the background, what it's doing is it's calling the Open Weather API. So this is a service which gives us an update about the temperature. So we are calling this service. Let's validate it. So let me open the network tab. So let's try to. So as you can see in the console tab, it has made an API request to the Open Weather API. And the response that the Open Weather API is generating, we are manipulating it and displaying it on our application. So let's try to test this application now. So I enter, for example, a city, let's say Amsterdam. So yes, it's displaying the current weather. It's displaying the weather in Amsterdam right now, so it's cloudy there. Let's now enter some random string. So it's saying, okay, sorry, we cannot find this enter city, which is also correct. Now let's try to enter some random strings. So it says, okay, sorry, we cannot find enter city, which also seems correct as it's a random string. Now let's try to test some numbers. So seems like it's displaying the weather of the place where this postal codes belongs to, which also seems correct. Now let's try to test for sunny weather. So I want to have sun here. And how do I do that? It's winter, right? I cannot wait for 6 months to sun to come, or I have to search in the database or some place where it's sunny right now, which is a very difficult case. Or what happens if I want to test that if this API is giving me error, how my application is reacting. So how do I test those cases? Now let's try to understand what's the problem here. So seeing its architecture, we saw that there's a client which is making an API request to the server, which is an open weather server in our case. And this server is giving an API response back, and the client is displaying it there. And to test a lot of cases, what we don't have is control over this part. So we don't have control over the server and the API response, so it's difficult to test a lot of cases. And what we need is the control of the API. And how do we do that? Is so we had this setup, like we had a client which was calling Open Weather Server. So we'll break this connection and we'll create a mock server to which our system will talk. And this mock server will return a stubbed response. Stub means that we set up initially what we want the response to be. So we can make any response like a valid response, an invalid response, or even some error response. To create mock server and the stubbed response, we will use a tool called Wiremock. Why we chose Wiremock is because it's very easy to set up and configure, which we'll just see in a while. It has various features to offer. We'll explore some of them. It can be standalone or embedded. I'll explore majorly the standalone version. And it has very active community support. So you are never stuck anywhere. You always have support from the community to rescue you. As a general disclaimer, I'm a fan of approach over tools. So I would focus more on the approach of creating stubs, and tool we can choose whatever suits our application the best. So let's see how we set up Wiremock now. So we had this application. What I did, I've created, so we want to create a switch where to which our application can switch between the actual and the mock server. So here this is the source code of the application itself. I've added a drop down where if it's actual server, the value is actual server, it will call this endpoint. And if it's a mock server, it will call localhost 8080, which means where we'll set up the mock server. And for easiness, I've added the drop down here on the UI itself, so actual and mock server. And this is the only thing we need to do with the application itself. So to create the mocks itself, this is a Maven project that I've created. And in the POM XML, what I've added is a dependency to Wiremock and a dependency to JUnit just to run the test. And then I've added a Wiremock jar file, like you can see here, Wiremock standalone jar. And now I'll run this file. So let me So we can see that the mock server has started now. Let's see here. So by default, it starts on port 8080, and we can see that right now there are no mappings, but the mock server itself has started. We can see from here. So so by adding this jar file, we see that the files and a mapping folders is coming by default. So now we have set up the server, and what we do now want to do now is to create the stub response. To create the stub response, in the files folder, I've added this JSON file, which is exactly the copy of the response that we have got from the original API. And I would now create a function. So this is the function that I've created, which says stub for the current weather. And we will stub for the weather, like this is the endpoint, Hamburg weather. And it will return a response code of 200 and a body file of current weather.json, which I just showed you. So if I run this, we can see on the mappings now that there is a mapping for this weather endpoint. And now let's check here that if the endpoint mapping was successful. So yes, this endpoint is now, sorry. So we can see here now that yes, this endpoint has a successful stubbing. So now let's try to test our application with this. So as we can, let me open this. So if I call actual server and if I say Hamburg, we can see that it's making an API call to the actual server. And if I make mock, it is making a request to the localhost 8080 where my mock server is set up. So with this, we have seen that how we got a remove of the dependency. So we are no more dependent on the open weather now, and we can test our system in isolation. Now I would like to go over some scenarios where the technique of stubbing can really help us. Scenario number one, difficult to reproduce scenario. A lot of times our scenarios are like, they need a lot of preconditions to set up. So there are some config files that we need to set up or something in the database that we need to change. So they are like jigsaw puzzle or Rubik cube where we have to do a lot of configurations. For example, consider testing the sunny weather, like we said before, or some thunderstorm conditions as extreme case. How do we do that? So we can take help of stubbing here and test them easily. Let's see how. So this was the function that we had earlier. I would just copy paste this and say here different weather. And here I would say different weather.json. And I'll copy paste this file. And name it as different weather.json. So in this file, I'll change now the code to 800, which is sunny. So now I've changed the code to 800, which is specified as for sunny in the contract. So I'll run this function now. So we can see that this test is successful. And if I do this now, so we can see that it's showing now sunny weather. So we can test different kind of conditions with help of stubs. For example, also for thunderstorm, let's see. So now if I check the weather for Hamburg, it's showing me a thunderstorm. So it's we can check these kind of conditions easily with help of stubbing. Similar kind of scenarios we can test which are difficult to reproduce are setting any body response. So not only changing with the temperature or with the icon, we can change anything like sunset, sunrise, about the countries and so on. And we can test complicated cases like we did now for the thunderstorm weather and some edge cases also. Scenario 2, invalid responses. Bugs, our favorite word, right? But what if these bugs are occurring in the APIs we depend upon and not in our system? We still want to check that our system is reacting correctly to these bugs and itself not showing some other error. And with help of stubbings, we can test these kind of scenarios very easily. From now on, I've pre-recorded the scenarios and I'll show you the videos. So for the invalid scenarios, let's see how we can do this. So this is the function that we created earlier itself, which is I've added the invalid JSON, and this is returning me 200 status code. So it's the same function that we had earlier. And this is the similar file that we had earlier. And now I will make it invalid in front of you. So as you can see, I'll change the data type from integer to strings. So ABCD for minimum, and for maximum, I'll say something like EFGH. So both of them are now strings instead of integers. And I will remove some mandatory fields like sunset and sunrise. They are mandatory, so I've removed them. So now this file has become invalid. And now I'll run the function. So this is an invalid response, which I get. So on running the function, we see that the changes are reflected. So ABCD and EFGH, and there are no sunset, sunrise. We check how our system reacts to it. So I've created mock and then Hamburg. And you can see that the temperature is NAN, and its sunset and sunrise are invalid IST, which is wrong. It's displaying bugs on the UI, which is not good for user experience. And these kind of bugs we can easily catch with help of creating the stubs. And similar kind of ideas to test for invalid scenarios are for body, like I currently removed some mandatory fields and made the body corrupt. We can even make some correct format, like if it's a JSON, I remove some commas and braces and so on. We can also see what happens if we add extra fields to the body. And not only with body, we can play around with headers also. So see what if we miss some headers, what if we add some invalid headers, or what if even we some add extra headers, then how is our system responding to it? Scenario 3, API responsiveness. A lot of times we are experiencing APIs which are very slow, but it's 2020, right? No one is going to wait for a weather check report for 1 minute. We are so impatient these days. But what if the APIs are still slow? We want to make sure that we are giving a good feedback to the user about it. So we can take again the help of stubbings to test these kind of cases. So let's see. We have this previous function itself. So it has status code 200 and it has a body file current weather JSON. And I will add a delay to it deliberately. So with the fixed delay of 8,000 milliseconds, I'll add for this case. So I've added the delay. And now I'll run the test. So test is successful. And now I load the API and you can see that there's a hover on the top. So it means like it's a circular thing. It's still loading. And I'll check on the application how it's responding. So Hamburg, and then in the console, you can see that it's a pending application or pending request. So you can see on the left-hand side, it's airplane was there. So it was loading, which is correct. And after it has fetched, the details are loaded correctly. So we experienced that the user was given a good feedback with a loading sign on the top saying that, yes, we are processing your request and we have like some delays. So it's a good user feedback. And these kind of things also we can test easily with help of stubbing. Scenario number 4, errors and faults. Scenario number 4, errors and faults. A lot of times the APIs we depend upon are giving us some errors. And we want to make sure that seeing this error, our application is not responding with errors in turn and they are handling it correct. So let's see how stubbing can help us here. So this is the function itself that we had previously. And now I'll make the API respond with an error of 500. So ISE, and I'll remove the body JSON file. And I'll run the function. So the test is successful. And now I'll check on the API. So you can see the response is successfully stubbed. It is saying 500. So our API is giving us internal server error. And now I'll check on the application how it's responding. Open the inspect tab, network tab. And if I get the weather, you can see that the application has crashed. So boom, our application did not handle this bug correctly. Instead of giving some valid errors or some good user feedback, it was giving us a crash, which is wrong. Similarly, we can also check for fault. Let's see. So again, we have this application where a function. So I'll remove this and add a fault to it. So with fault, and I'll add the fault of connection error. So fault dot connection reset error, and I'll run the function. So our test is successful, and on running it, we can see that it is successfully stubbed. So we can see error connection reset here. And now we'll check how our application responds to it. So we'll say Hamburg. And then we can see on the network tab, it's saying that the error has already failed. But on the left-hand side, we are saying this loading loop forever. And it's giving a wrong feedback to the user that your request is in process. So this is not correct. We have already failed. So we should have given some error that, sorry, we could not fetch the data or something like that. And these kind of errors where the APIs we depend upon are giving us errors, we can easily stub and see how our systems are reacting with this. And the similar kind of ideas, what we can do is we can check for any status code. Like currently, I checked for 500 ISC. We can check for any server-side errors like anything in 500s. We can check for client-side errors like bad request or rate limiting, etc. And we can even check for any status code which is non-error code, like in 200s and 300s. We can also check for different kind of faults, like I checked for peer connection. There are random data flows and certain others that Wiremock also provides us. Scenario 5, API not ready. Consider the case when the APIs are under construction. So let's say the front end is ready, but the back end is not, or the one team is ready, but the team that we depend upon is not ready. So what do? We cannot wait for these teams to get finished or backend to get finished and then test our application. That would take so long. So what do we do in certain cases? Let's see with help of an example. So we had this application where we were displaying the weather code. And now imagine that we are having a new module in our service where our users can log in and see their image and name and certain other functionalities. And now this profile team is not ready. So the API is still under construction. So what we can do to test this scenario is to mock these APIs that the profile team would have with the contract that we'll have set up with the profile team, and we can test all the scenarios that I've gone in in previous slides, like about testing how about valid scenarios, invalid scenarios, what about long name, the names in different language, the different image sizes, and so on. So we don't need to depend upon other teams to get finished. And these kind of scenarios we can easily test. So we saw different scenarios where stubbing can help us and it can support us reach the new heights of testing. Now let's have a look in the bigger picture. So what we saw right now was that we had a UI which was calling a microservice. And to test the UI, what we were trying to do was to identify the service it depends upon and mock it. And now test the UI in isolation. A lot of systems these days look like this, like a lot of microservices involved. So to test a microservice like the one that I've made green, we need to follow the same approach. So we try to find out what APIs it depends upon, what other microservices it depends upon. So like this, and we mock them and test our service, which is in green, in isolation. So if someone asks us if mocks are only for web applications, no, a big no. To test any system under test, no matter if it's a web application, a mobile application, or even some other microservice, and if they if they depend upon some microservice or some external parties, what we need to do is to mock the dependencies that they have. So to get rid of the dependencies and to test these systems in isolation. With this, I'll wind up and I'll say what are the pros. Um, so we saw how to test system in isolation. How do we reduce the dependencies? And that stubbings help us to do parallel development, like we saw in the case of when profile API is not ready and our API is. That stubs are very reliable because we are setting them ourselves and like they're not dependent on anything. They're very fast response and they help us test some complicated and edge case scenarios. And they also help us test some delays, like we added a delay of 8,000 milliseconds earlier. And it helps us prevent rate limiting. So we are not hitting the real application, but the mock server. So not a lot of requests would go to the real server. So we'll prevent rate limiting there. There are also some cons of stubbing, like maintenance. So we need to see what different contracts do we have. We need to update them with time if there are more APIs and so on. And with the it increases complexity. So more the number of dependent APIs, the more the complexity would get increased. And more about cons. Sorry, I don't know. I don't know any more cons about it. And if you get to know when you use it, you get to know. Do let me know. So to summarize this, we had a look on how and why to test mock, how and why to set up mock server. We saw how we can stub different kind of responses. We saw how we can test systems in isolation by removing the dependencies. We saw benefits of stubs. And we saw how to check a weather application. So I hope next time you see a weather app or you try to test your system with stubs, you remember me. With this, I'll wind up. And these are the application links, as I promised, for the weather source code and for the Wiremock project. And for some references, for more references, I have links from Martin Follower, Bas Digitra, and Kapil Agarwal. They have written some great articles. So I would suggest you to please go through them. And the Wiremock documentation in itself is also very good.
Great. Thank you, Shivani. Shivani, are you there? I am not seeing you. Are you? Are you there? I am not seeing you at this moment. Shivani? I am typing you from the phone. Okay. Hi, are you there, Shivani? Are you there? Shivani? Let's wait. There is something with the sound, maybe.
How to check a weather application. So I hope next.
Now, yes. Great. You have to turn off. Yes. There is. No, you have to turn off YouTube.
I did.
Okay, great. Okay, so we have some questions. Thank you very much for your presentation. First of all, it was really clear. I do like the examples. Let's start with the first questions that we have.
Before we move on to the questions, I would just like to thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I really enjoy to be on this platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Shivani. So let's start with the questions. The first one is from Ramal. And the question is, can we mock part of APA in case half APA response from server and other half from mocking?
I actually do not see any good use case for this thing to happen. But yes, what we can do, of course, is, for example, your, let's say, web app is calling more than one API, and you want to check only some API with the real integration and some with the virtual, with the mock ones, then I would suggest you that it's not necessary to mock every API that your current application is calling, but to mock some of them. But to mock a part of API, I'm not sure if there would be a use case where you would like to do something like this, because the essence of why we want to create stubs and why we want to have a mock server is because we want to get rid of that particular part or that particular API itself in our test. So if you have a concrete case or an example, we can explore this for sure.
Great. I will let you know if Romal types something in the feed.
For sure.
Meanwhile, we have another question from Edgardo.
Mm-hmm.
Any good practices to give some sort of abstraction for maintenance purposes?
Yes, maintenance is one of the most ad hoc process in case of mocks, and I would suggest to go for contract testing. So to have a consumer and a producer, so we can have consumer-driven contracts. There are some tools like Pact out there in market, which help us achieve this. So when the API contract is changing or anything in the API is changing, which would affect the consumer, they would be notified automatically. So your test would fail. And this way, it would be very easy and convenient for us to also have maintenance of these mocks.
Great, thank you. We have another question, which is in Spanish, so I will translate it for you.
Thank you.
So the question is, if you have any suggestion when someone is starting to test, any type of tools that you would suggest to apply this approach, beside the one that you have shared today?
Surely. There are other tools. For example, MVM. It's there for Node.js applications and where GraphQL is involved. Even you can mock with the help of Postman. It's a very common tool that we all use for creating to test APIs. So there's also facility to stub your calls using Postman. But I think the approach is more like what suits your project the best. So if, for example, your tests are already written in APIs for Postman and you want to integrate in that tool only, I would suggest to go for Postman. If your tests are, let's say, in Java and you want to integrate your code with your mocks with these existing tests itself, then something Java-based, that would be my approach. So yes, there are other tools.
So regarding tools, we have another question. Is the tool that you have shared free to use?
Yes, it's absolutely free to use. So all the demo that I gave with different scenarios and everything, that was all from the free version itself.
Okay. Another. Right. Another one. Let me check. I am reading here. Can we stuff dynamic responses, like for one endpoint getting different responses depending on open a scenario?
Yes, we can do this. So at least in Wiremock, there's a thing called transformers, which help us say, like in the beginning of the test, what our response would be. Like you can set up different responses, and depending upon what your conditions are, it will return one of the response that you have said. I can also share the link for transformer
Thank
in
you.
Wiremock, so people can refer it for later. Like you can create templates. So I would just I shared with you, Claudia. Maybe you can pass it.
Okay. Yeah,
Thank.
sure. Or you can paste it in the feed of YouTube.
If I open YouTube now, it's double. Like
Okay, okay, I will do it. Okay, I will see.
I can
Okay,
do it later after the call,
uh,
and I would also post the link of all the tools that I know for
I have
um,
just I
Linux.
have just pasted, so it's there. And the last question, here. Can we staff post put request also beside the one that we have seen?
Yes, sure. You can post. You can stub any method, even post and put. So it's not limited to get. So where I was using the function dot get, you can use dot post, and
Great,
we can also send the body around.
great. So thank you very much. Let me check if there is another question. We have like thank you from Georgette. Thank you for Juan also. We
Thank.
have greetings from Mexico.
Oh, that's
So thank you very much for joining us. I know that it's late for you today. So thank you very much for joining us. I do like your presentation. I think it's important to have this type of talks also that are more technical. And thank you very much for your time. And it's great that you made the time to join us.
thank you so
So
much for everyone for joining and for such a warm welcome. I'm happy to be here.
So
Thank.
thanks again, everyone. See you soon and keep safe. Thank you, Shivani. Buena jornada y buena semana para todos. Thank you very much.
I
Bye
didn't,
bye.
but thank you.
Bye bye.